Welcome to Seeing This. I'm Mike Ornelas, and I have the great fortune to be joined by two-time Emmy Award-winning composer turned writer-director, Trevor Morris. Trevor has worked on over 30 feature films and over 700 hours of television and video game composition as a composer. His short film, Butterfly on a Wheel, is his debut film as a writer-director and focuses on mental health through the eyes of a gifted young musician. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
You've worked in the industry now over the past couple decades, winning two Emmys along the way, as I mentioned. And over the course of your career, you've worked with a lot of big names: Tony Ridley Scott, Jerry Bruckheimer, Hans Zimmer as well, along many others. So I ask, why now, and why this story to make the transition to writer filmmaker? And is that a goal that you've always had in your career?
That's a great question. It was really just sort of the universe talking to me, if that makes sense. COVID had come around and which, took everybody down to some sort of baseline. But for me personally, it really hit me hard. It's hard to describe why, which is sort of the the timing of my life, I guess. And I was really in a bad place. I was not in a good place. And Butterfly on a Wheel started off as a journal entry. I was trying to dig my way out of this emotional sort of black hole that I was in. I was in a bad spot. And the therapist I was working with, the spiritual counselor, said, "So let's start at the beginning, which is what's good. Like, what's your earliest good memory?" And my earliest warm, fond memory is sitting in my grandmother's lap and her playing Puff the Magic Dragon on piano to me. That became the first entry in this journal, which ultimately became the script of the movie. So I wrote it as a catharsis sort of thing, and I'm raising kids in a time where visibility vis-a-vis likes on Instagram that are part of your self-worth, and it's an interesting parenting challenge. Anyway, I wrote that, I put it away, and then the writer strike landed in Hollywood, shut down Hollywood for another year. So I wrote something else for that year. I wrote a whole other feature.
Hmm.
I came back to Butterfly and I'm like, oh, this is something that I want to see come to life. And I thought I might as well just direct it because I'm probably, even though I have no experience directing, I'm probably the best guy for the job, if that
Hmm.
makes any
Hmm.
sense. I guess I got to go to directing school. I'm self-taught, so I basically spent a year and a half almost learning how to direct, everything about directing, um, and decided just to sort of do it as a way to run towards something that was hard. And I find it was very new, and newness is hard to find the older you get, as you know. And that's kind of how it came to pass.
You mentioned this being, quite autobiographical, right? And I think you do a great job highlighting the feeling of having anxiety, especially some of the scenes that are shot. That they're very visceral. And I'm curious, what's it like kind of being vulnerable to that level? Someone that faces something personally, but is also quite universal. How did you kind of approach all of that?
Yeah, it's I give credit to my producers who pushed me down this road. I've come to believe, to paraphrase you, a universal truth, which is that which is most personal is most universal. And when you really realize that, and you watch movies that you love, no matter what the genre is, it could be horror for that matter. There's something about it that's personal, it's small, is what resonates with the audience, at least with me. So I find that to be very, very true. It's not autobiographical, but it's not autobiographical.
Sure.
Deeply personal is the way I describe it. But I had to go down the road of making it, so personal. I was nearly embarrassed to share the script, and that is what I believe is why it resonates with everybody that it has resonated with is the fact that I kind of just, man, open my soul and put it on the page and on screen too. My struggles aren't exactly the same as the characters, but they mirror a deeper my version of them. And that was the catharsis of it, was getting rid of this thing that was happening in my life. But it's amazing to me, having screened it in person a bunch of times, how many people resonate with this character, whether they're musicians or not, whether they have OCD or not, is not important. What's important is, and what I think is the real theme of the movie is we all want to be seen for who we really are as human beings. But how can we be seen for who we are if we don't see ourselves that way first? And
Mm.
that's really what I think our character Jason is going through, is his struggle to find his authentic voice.
To your point, I think that's something that a lot of creatives experience, but I've also learned across industry, everyone can deal with that kind of mental health to different degree
Mhm.
issue. You talked about being, kind of self-taught as far as, being a director. How has the transition been from, so many films and TV and video games that you've done composition to then do a film from writing to directing? What's the biggest challenges that maybe you didn't anticipate going into this genre?
Yeah, well, yeah, a lot, and at the same time, being the pragmatic Canadian that I am, if you ask me now that I think about it, if you ask me what my core competency is, really it's storytelling.
Mhm.
I happen to be using music for a long time. Then it became the written word, then the lens, etc. Right. I think the challenging thing for me was being on set because composing is a solitary act,
Mm,
literally alone, like
yeah.
a monk. It's much like writing. Screenplay writing is exactly the same as composing to me. They're almost identical art forms,
Yeah.
craft art thing. But getting on set and having, you yell cut and 50 people turn and look at you, that's a moment that I didn't really wasn't prepared for. But I enjoyed it. My producer said, when you're done this short, only one of two possibilities will exist. One, you'll never want to do it again because it was so,
Sure.
or you'll get the bug, and I got the bug, so which is great. But what I learned to be the most challenging thing, sort of the theme of our movie, isn't it? What I learned to be the most challenging thing ended up being the thing I enjoyed the most at the end, which was the collaborative nature of the team, which is cast and crew all aiming at the same point in space or trying to aim at the same point emotionally in space. And for me to get them all there, it's kind of like conducting the orchestra. So I learned to love it at the end, but it was a shocker at first, no doubt.
I can imagine. And, because this is your own film, I'm curious, how do you approach composing music for other people's projects versus your own? Is it more liberating or is it even maybe more stressful because it is yours?
It's a great question, and I did not premeditate or ruminate on how it would feel until the moment came. And I sat down to write and realized no one's going to give me notes.
Right.
No one's going to critique it. It's just me, right? And it became an enormous, um, um, not a burden, but it became a huge challenge for me to realize that I have to get it right. And no one else is going to say, it's a good start, but could you make it more like this and find our way to something that's good? It's all me. Ultimately liberating, but at first getting over the sort of the abject fear of making sure that I didn't screw it up. But I did have the big piece in the middle, the healing montage piece, which starts
Mm.
off as a tiny little piano gesture and grows into a fairly grand orchestral statement. That piece I always had in mind in shape, in size in my head, and I kind of did that one first and built the rest around it. But it was ultimately liberating and fun. But when I sat down the first time to put my hands on the keyboard, I'm like, oh wow, this is different. This is a difference.
You could feel the difference just in the energy from the
Yeah,
beginning, I
very much.
imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of energy, I'm curious, are there any films that kind of you pulled from as far as inspiration or theme, as far as how you wanted to approach the tone of Butterfly on a Wheel? Is there any inspiration that came from other films, or did you kind of go from a clean slate?
It's funny, I'm deep in developing, almost finishing my next project, feature film, and a lot of that is derived from my influences in the movies that I like. Butterfly is more. The answer is no, not. It's like, oh, it's not like a What's Eating Gilbert Grape or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. None of that,
Mm-hmm.
But it is sort of, you know, all art is an expression of what comes out of you had to have first come in you at some point. A lifetime of watching movies, a lifetime of of listening to music. It was important for me that the OCD part, and we had a great OCD consultant, wonderful man named Josh, working in Toronto, who helped us. I was so important to me that we portray that realistically, but not debilitating. Not like this guy can't function. He can.
Right.
He's just difficult. Getting out the door is a big challenge for this guy. That's a struggle, and I share some of that in my own life. So that was a big struggle to get it right. And I did look at other movies that portrayed OCD, and it's funny, not funny, but truthfully, most of them parody is a strong word. Most of them make light of it, I guess, because it's such an interesting and sensitive subject. And OCD is a very deep subject. There's 6 or 7 kinds of OCD. I focused on what I have, which is uh, symmetry and counting. That's one brand of OCD, but there are many.
Mm-hmm.
So that part of it was more just from me, kind of as opposed to, oh, I was really inspired by this kind of movie. But I find as I go forward, what I learned to answer your question in a different way, what I learned about being a director is being more specific about the movies that have influenced me. I rewatch all my favorite movies through the lens of a director, how it was shot, picking
Right.
apart the scenes, the lenses they use, the lighting, stuff like that. I'm much more specific now about which movies influence me on the way that I want to make films, as opposed to I enjoy them. Like, for example, Spielberg movies, we all love Spielberg, but I'll never make a movie like he makes movies. I just don't think that way. But I love them, hugely influential on me. Whereas, I have a bit more Michael Mann in me than I have, say, Spielberg, stuff like that. You know what I mean? But Butterfly on the Wheel was meant to be non-derivative. Well, I mean, all movies are, but it was really just kind of born out of trying to get the artist journey in front of people in some way that was universally resonant.
Your film pays a wonderful tribute to the city of Toronto.
Mhm.
Beautiful shots highlighting the high-rise buildings as well as the experience of commuting on foot or through the TTC.
Mhm.
Having lived there for a couple years, it definitely transported me back into the
Yeah.
subway system. Can you talk about the creative environment or influence Toronto has, maybe for people that have never visited but love the entertainment industry? How has that environment influenced you as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, in quotations, became a man in this business in Toronto. I moved there from my small town when I was 18. And so my formative years of learning everything that I learned was in Toronto. I always say this, I moved to LA reluctantly because I was trying to break into the film business. And at that time, not now, then the film business was sort of fledgling, I guess is the word. And there really wasn't any white space. There was no movies being made or TV shows being made. So I moved to LA out of pragmatism because that's where the work was.
Right.
But, I've lived here a long time and met my wife, my kids. I'm grateful for California and everything in every way. But my heart has always been in Canada and specifically that city. I love Toronto and no hyperbole. I think it's the best city in the world, or at least tied with some of the best cities in the world.
Sure.
There's nothing that a city could offer that it doesn't have. And it's cleaner, quieter, smaller, and more better, in my opinion.
Right.
And when I wrote Butterfly, it never occurred to me for it to not be set there.
Mm.
It just from day one, I'm like, I'm gonna, if I can, showcase the city. It is a love letter to Toronto, no doubt about it. And Toronto's often shot for other cities, to double as New York or Chicago or whatever. This was really just Toronto for Toronto's sake, and the crew loved it. And my producer's like, yeah, we could shoot it in other places. I'm like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're shooting it in Toronto. So it's just a city that I love. I return to as often as I can. My friends are there, my family's there, my mom, my dad, my sister. It's again, I love California and it's been good to me and I've been good to it, but it's never going to be where I'm from. It
Sure.
just, it just won't be, and where I'm from is in where my heart is Toronto.
100%. It's very hard not to have a memorable impact if you've ever visited or lived in Toronto, even if you're not from there. So I can completely understand that. I'm curious, just a little background, a couple more questions for you. The music taste you have growing up, what kind of music do you listen to on your free time? Is it something that has really influenced the way you do composition or how you want to use composition in your future films here? What's that like?
Oh, definitely as a kid, I was a classical music guy, right? Which
Okay.
is the genesis of all film music is really, you know, um, neoclassical and onward, certainly as you get into the later stuff, so I grew up around Bach and Beethoven, that kind of thing. Um, I think it's funny when I got into composing after writing music all day and I would come home to make dinner. Um, I tend to put on jazz is the short answer
Mm,
for two reasons. One, jazz is the one area of music that I'm not super strong at. I think you're born with it or not born with it, really in your DNA, and I don't think I have it. I mean, I understand it. I could play it sorta, but I'm not a jazz. It's not in my DNA. So I enjoy listening to it because it's sort of I have a hard time listening to anything and not picking it apart in real time.
sure,
It
sure.
it's just fun. It's like breathing. But with jazz, I kind of let it just wash over me because it's so its own thing. So I'll put on Bill Evans' greatest hits, and there's no lyrics. I don't want to listen to the lyrics at the end of the day because I don't want to have to think about more meaning. I just want
Sure.
to vibe, pour a glass of red wine. But my thing is, I love to have a glass of wine and cook dinner, and that is my decompression half hour or hour. So a lot of jazz is the answer to that. Um, with kids, it's different because they say, "Hey Siri," and they throw on, loud, crazy stuff. But given my own devices, it's a lot of if it is not jazz, it's usually just classic rock, stuff I grew up
Sure.
with, Van
Sure.
Halen, stuff
Yeah.
fun, makes you feel like you're a kid again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you've been very gracious with your time. Just one last question for you that I like to ask everyone. What is a underseen movie or maybe even composition in a film that you would like to recommend for people to check out?
Oh, gee, that's a loaded one. I would say, I'm gonna go with, my favorite composer, who is not as famous as most of the other ones. His name's James Newton Howard, who, I've known for a long time, who I think he's certainly a composer's composer. He did most of M. Night Shyamalan's movies, and one of M. Night Shyamalan's few biggest flops was a movie called Lady in the Water.
Mhm.
Paul Giamatti, and the score is off the charts amazing. I mean, it's just mind-blowingly good, but I don't think many people have heard it,
Right.
First thing that came to mind, to be honest, was Lady in the Water. So, I think that if nothing else, throw the soundtrack on, if you're a soundtrack lover like I am, and I imagine you are as well. Um, there's a little influence of James in the score of Butterfly, to be
Mhm.
honest. There's a little bit of homage to him in a way that I don't know if anyone will pick up but me, but yeah, there's a little him in there because he was hugely influential to me and he was very nice to me earlier in my career. We still keep in touch. So
Love that.
it's nice to have met a hero and he turned out to be a gentleman, which he very much is, and it stuck with me. So there's a little nod to James in the score to Butterfly as my little thank you.
I love that. I'm a big collector of physical media, specifically vinyls. So my collection is pretty much general music, Pink Floyd. I'm a big Pink Floyd guy, and then movie scores and soundtracks. So that's definitely one I'll keep an eye out as far as to collect and add to the collection.
Yeah.
Trevor, thank you so much. Congratulations again on the film, and I look forward to this feature. Just hearing that you have some Michael Mann in you, can't wait to see what that's like.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on it. But yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate being here.